Okay, everybody, why don't we get started? I want to take a moment and thank AF. This is Peter LaMotte. I'm talking to you from Charleston, South Carolina today. I'm with Chernoff Newman and a senior vice president here. We are using the Zoom platform, obviously, but we're in the times that we're in, we're just trying to make this work. So bear with us if we should have any glitches. But we're sort of working off of multiple devices down here. So if you see us lagging in somewhere or another, scream out on the chat function and we'll figure it out. But this is real time and trying to get as much information to everybody as we can. But I just want to go ahead and say thank you to AAF for asking me to do this. And let's get started. So let me tell you just at the beginning, I don't think it's needs to be said, but we're dealing with something completely unprecedented here. We're all trying to figure this out. We're all learning as we go. And the thing to remember in times such as this, that while they may be unique, the way that we deal with any crisis is going to be built off of fundamental operational procedures that will work if you pay attention to them, and if you ignore them, they will work against you. So the old adage is no crisis should go to waste. That goes for all of us here today, across our industry, across all of our companies. We need to adapt, we need to communicate, and Andy Grove from Intel said it best: bad companies are destroyed by crisis, good companies can survive them, and great companies are improved by them. And I have no doubt that those of us who try and look to this opportunity as a way that we are better on the other side of this, as much as those pains are unexpected, that we will all be better companies before it. So we're limited on time, so I'm going to go through this as fast as I can. But here's how I've laid out the agenda. Zoom makes it a little bit difficult for anyone to ask verbal questions. So I would ask that you just send questions down to the chat window. I have some friends here in Charleston that are monitoring that, and they'll give me the heads up when a question pops up. But I am also, at the end of the call, you're going to see a link. I'm going to open up my calendar for anyone to book some time. And ask me some questions in more of a less public setting. The fact is, we need to be there for not only our industry, for our region, for our district, I mean, truly for our country. So if there is some small way that I can help your organization, I am happy to do that. And you'll see that link at the end of the call. We're going to start with the fundamentals. And I want to start with a basic overview of crisis communications, because as much as I've been living in this world for a good while, I sometimes forget that this is new territory for a lot of people. I'm going to go through it quickly, but I think it's important for everyone to understand how someone in my field looks at a situation, especially one that we're dealing with now. But for any crisis on any given day, there's a specific way that we're going to do that. Because we know before this epidemic, before this pandemic hit, that a crisis would come. It comes quickly. In today's world, it comes fast. It comes without warning. It comes without any context. One of the crises that we talk about a lot in the field is the 1982 Tylenol crisis. Horrible event. But back then, people could think about their public response. They could send it over to legal. Someone could check. They could then check with their customers. They could check with their partners. They could have a structured, planned out conversation with media outlets. Now we literally have hours to get it right. And now the crisis has come. Coronavirus presents a situation that essentially last hit the world before the average person had a telephone in their home. So think about that for a second. We can relate with a crisis like the Tylenol one, say before computers were widespread. We can think back to 9/11 when social media really wasn't around. But now you're dealing with a crisis that affects millions of people, billions of people really, in real time, with real news alerts and real misinformation and real-time rumors and real-time panic. And trust me, it's only going to get worse. These numbers are going to grow. The restrictions on our daily lives will expand, and our businesses are going to be turned upside down even more. And none of us really know when we're going to be getting back to normal. But we do have some control. And I realize that's hard to hear, but we have control over how we can handle it, because crises, they happen. Crises happen every single day. And while they may not be the biggest crisis to ever hit your business, like what we're dealing with now, you still have to decide what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, because a few things are true no matter what the crisis, whether it's global or specific to your business alone. There are some similarities. One of the things about a crisis is there are 3 people involved in every single crisis, no matter what. There's the victim. There's the villain. Who are we going to blame for this? There's the victim. Who was the one actually harmed by this crisis? And then there's the vindicator. Who is going to be the hero that saves the day? But here's why response time is so important. Because how quickly you respond, and it's really depending on how well prepared you are, but depending on when and how you respond, or even not to respond, that's the decision that has to be made quickly. Otherwise, others will assign those roles. So obviously, we're in a different situation. The coronavirus is without form, without gender, without race, and the victim is everyone. But in our own way, we need to look for our ability and our role to be the vindicator in this situation. Now that obviously you are not going to be able to affect national policy. You are not going to be able to affect state policy, but you can affect how your employees handle it, how your customers handle it, how your partners, your vendors, and how you as an organization and the brand that you represent handles it. Because reputational damage will really come down to how prepared you are. And the only way you can possibly be able to handle this threat is to be prepared. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, yeah, but we're already in it and we haven't done anything. That's okay, we're gonna talk about that. A lot of people will say, well, sure, the large firms, they have dozens of crisis plans that, they knew what to do. They were prepared years ago. But small businesses need to have those plans set up as well. You can't simply put your head in the sand and assume it's going to go away. So you don't need to worry about everything. Obviously, we have one giant worry right now, but I wanted to show you this chart that I created for clients, how to deal with their fear, for lack of a better term. So where is your crisis coming from? Is it a server outage? Is it, CEO resignation? Is it leaked information? Everything can be categorized. And how you prepare for that particular scenario, sort of based where you fall in this chart. So my argument is that you should prepare for anything that falls into the green or blue-green range. Here's the fact. If you have frequent and catastrophic business risks, I'm not really worried about you. You're going to be out of business anytime now. If a crisis is so improbable with negligible impact on your business, you shouldn't be spending the cycles worrying about it. Now, we could have never predicted the coronavirus per se, but these threats have been knocking at our door for a while. Whether it was Ebola or SARS, having a plan for some sort of external threat that would prevent your staff from coming into work or your clients stopping what they're doing is something we can plan for. If you don't have one, don't worry about it. That's what today is about. So let's talk about how you actually respond when you're in a crisis, because you need to decide now how you're going to handle it. And there are a few things that ring true no matter what a crisis is. Keep in mind, I want to make sure that we get through to questions. So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. I will also tell you from just calls that we've been getting and paying attention to our customers. I have a list of questions that come to us on a regular basis too. So we'll go through those at the end. But I'm happy to answer any questions once we get to the Q&A. So now it is recommended that you should always try and respond to a crisis in an hour. But that's more of an adage for a forcing event, an event that affects your business with more of an acute action, a moment in time. We are in totally different territory here. We've all known about the coronavirus for months, but had companies started issuing statements back in January when it was first hitting the newsways, it wouldn't have made any strategic sense. But when we started to see the spread in Europe, we should have all started preparing to say something, because that tidal wave was headed our way. The example you see on this slide is from the 2017 April incident on United Airlines, where the passenger traveling to Kentucky was forcibly removed from an aircraft. And this kicked off the worst handling of a crisis event probably in the last decade. And not only was it poorly executed as far as timing, but it also was poor leadership in the midst of the crisis. And that's what we're going to talk about. There were conflicting statements. United put the blame on the customer. And this is really important to remember when we talk about those three characters. When Dr. Dow, that's the passenger, when he immediately was already cast as the victim by the public, United attempted very poorly to reassign his role. And what it only did is solidified their position as the villain. So as far as timing is concerned, United didn't execute an official corporate response until about 18 hours after the event. So by that time, the control of the situation was long gone. So timing is key. You need to make sure that you are responding as soon as something happens. And that's important as it relates to the coronavirus, because things are constantly changing. So if we go from a mandated quarantine, like happening in New York City and San Francisco, you are going to have a response to that, one that is issued quickly. But let's take a look at brevity. Now, this is using social media, so obviously it's more conducive to brevity, but no one wants to read your long-winded explanation as to what's going on. The school of thought on a press release is it should never be longer than 400 words. That's roughly a little over 1 minute of reading, but it overlooks social media. People don't want to take an entire minute to read your response on a Facebook post. They'd rather know upfront what you are messaging, and then they can decide whether or not you have earned their time to click on a link or expand it to read the remaining 350 to 400 words. So the phrase to remember when crafting your communications is simple. If you're explaining, you're losing. A colleague of mine used to say this when I first left the advertising world to join the PR world. And the statement goes against human nature. I get that. When bad things happen, you want to tell what happened. But channel, as he used to say, channel your inner mother. If your explanation is essentially, but they started it, or we're the victim and it wasn't my fault, no one cares. The audience doesn't care. So just remember, when you are crafting messages, it is about brevity and it is about timing. And as we go through, the next one is probably the most important, and that's empathy. Now, what I did here is I looked through my mail to find the earliest sort of outreach, but this is possibly the most important core idea. Empathy, we're rarely in the midst, or right now I should say, we're in the midst of a crisis that everyone can relate with. Everyone is affected by this. Everyone has a question, there's not enough answers, and honestly, at some level, everyone is scared. So considering Washington State was the first to really be hit, it's no shock that Alaska Airlines was one of the first emails I got. But take a look at the tone of the copy, if you can read that. It exudes empathy for the reader. Uncertainty can be unsettling. Our hearts go out to those that have been impacted. Our top priority is always the safety of you and our employees. And they're not even pandering to say it's all about you, the customer. It's about their team too, because in times like this, people separate employees from corporate leadership. And there's actual empathy towards these employees, these pilots, these flight attendants that are also looking, at the possibility of being without a job. So the public empathizes with everyone involved now. Now, I know I keep using airline examples, but let me show you something that took place in spring of 2017. This was April as well. I mean, it happened right after the United event. Terrible story. Employee brings a mother to tears. It was all caught on video and social media. It went out. We're not going to worry about the details and picking it apart, but I want you to pay attention to the copy. We are deeply sorry for the pain we have caused this passenger and her family and to any of the customers affected by the incident. So they're going beyond just the person who was clearly affected by it, but anyone around there. This is the key to empathy. A leader in a crisis must display a sense of confidence, but at the same time expressing signs of empathy towards those were hurt and harmed. The counter. This goes all the way back, 10 years ago now, but BP oil crisis. Everyone remembers this line of the CEO saying, "I want my life back." And what's important this was based on a question posed by the media saying, all of these people and I forget whether it was Louisiana or Alabama or Florida, what it was pertaining to, the question itself, but they said they want to get their lives back. What do you say to them? And he said, "I want my life back too." He then went on about all the things that they were going to do, but this is the line that brought down the man's career and put BP on their heels. What a leader needs to do is actually show some admission. The most important word in any crisis from a leader is "I am sorry," especially if we're dealing with coronavirus. It's "I'm sorry that you are dealing with this. I am sorry that we are unable to service your account. I am sorry that what you were expecting from us didn't happen." Apologies aren't about taking blame. Apologies are about showing that empathy, showing that you understand how the customer feels, showing that you are genuinely sorry that you are in the position that you are, regardless of who caused it. This is from 2007. It goes way back, but essentially, people were stranded on airplanes in New York City due to a blizzard. And JetBlue forced people to be on these airplanes for 8 hours, and it was a disaster. It was a PR disaster, and it's hard to imagine, but YouTube was pretty new. This was one of the first examples of a CEO ever getting on a video camera and posting it online to apologize. But it changed the game. Now, the next example I use is not to be political. It is just simply one of the best examples of the perfect execution. So President Obama, everyone's always said he's a good communicator, but in 2009, he was in the midst of, shockingly, what was considered a crisis back then. But President Obama pulled the nomination of Tom Daschle for Health and Human Services Secretary because it turned out he hadn't paid a bunch of taxes. But almost immediately, Obama addressed the issue in a press briefing in the White House press room. And he said, "I screwed up and I take responsibility for it. And we're going to make sure we fix it so it doesn't happen again." This is a perfect execution of an apology in that particular situation. Now, finally, you have to promise to solve the problem, but then you have to solve the problem. We talked about the United one. I'll show that on this screen. But people, or at least someone in your audience, is not going to forget, whether that's a client, whether that's a disgruntled employee. You need to say you are going to solve the problem, you are going to at least address the problem, and then you are actually, you need to follow through and do it. but you can't solve the coronavirus. You just can't. It's an unsolvable external threat. And you have to look at it this way. Your actions may help mitigate the damage of the coronavirus to your clients, to your employees, to their families. You have to be seen as helping in this situation. And any statement without that piece has lost one of the most powerful messages that you can convey. People don't want to hear that you just have empathy. They don't want to just hear that you're sorry, unless you can actually have an impact with action that you're going to take and make it better. Go back to that American Airlines example. Look at the bottom of this very brief press release. After electing to take another flight, we're taking special care of her and her family and upgrading them to first class for the remainder of their international trip. The American team member has been removed from duty while we immediately investigate the incident. The point here is they went to solve the problem. If you don't solve the problem, in this case, they solved the problem for the woman. As far as the majority of the public was concerned in this story, it's over. They tried to make it right. Now, that isn't to say that you can't, you just can't underdeliver. You can't not do something of substance. The public won't be satisfied. But in the case of what we're dealing with now, we have to show that we care and we are taking action to rectify it, not just to identify the issue and say that we feel bad. So really quickly, when we go about when you're thinking about your communications going forward, what do we look at? We look at our timing. Are we being brief? Are we getting to the point? Are we sharing the facts that are important? Are we showing empathy and consideration? Are we, where there is mistakes on our part, are we admitting to them? And are you providing a solution? Briefly, where are we executing? How are we executing? You know what? Pick your path and pick more than one. So how and when can you convey this message? Well, it's dependent on the situation. Some make more sense. A dark site. So for example, the website. There are things called dark sites. If you don't know them, a lot of corporations have them. There are crises that have never happened that corporations have websites ready to go live. That in today's day and age is how you respond quickly. Whether it's a manufacturing disaster, whether it's a fire, whether it's a mass layoff or something, many major corporations have those websites ready to go, commented out so that they can't be found, and they go live when they need them. But more importantly, let's talk about the coronavirus. There's some great websites out there right now simply as resources. Companies that are going out there and saying, you know, we don't have to do this, but this is how we're helping in this situation. If you want to, find resources for educating your children while you're at home, if you're trying to find, how do we travel? People are providing resources that go well beyond their business model. Social media, public engagement, press statements, events, creating content, whether it's blogs or advertising to share your message, if that's important, a video of your leadership. When there is a crisis, BP oil spill was a perfect example. Search engine marketing, for years, they made it so that if you ever searched for the BP oil spill, that the first link at the top of the page what led you to their landing page that said everything that they were doing to recover and help out the communities. So it's really up to you as to what makes sense. Maybe this is something, if you're really torn by this, we can talk about it one-on-one. But I just wanted to share, there's no path that you shouldn't take that doesn't make sense. When we get, for example, I was talking to one client about what are the events, because they're in the home building world. What are the events that we can at least prepare for now? Because no, we can't have, at least here in South Carolina, it's more than 10 people. So we're not hosting any events. Virtual events don't make sense for their business. So they're planning, okay, what are going to be the events that we do right out of the gate to show that we're back in business? Think about it now. Okay, so let's talk specifically on what we're dealing with today. How do you communicate? How do we keep our heads on straight? We don't want to make any mistakes. that are going to affect our brand. We don't want to make mistakes that are going to affect our employees' morale and our customers' confidence in us. So most important, and I can't stress this enough, you need to surround yourself and your business with rational people that understand a path of resiliency for your business and your organization. You can't sit around and wait to see what happens, but you can't also panic. Here's the thing about panic, it creates fear. And when people are fearful, they start seeing enemies and challenges that aren't simply there. You need to have the smartest people who have level heads leading your organization or next to the leaders in the organization. And they may not be the ones you've necessarily identified as the leaders of your organization. You have enough challenges in your business on any given day. Now you need people who are focused on helping your company, your customers, and its employees be there and make it to the other side of the crisis. So identify who those people are in your organization and put them to work. The people who excel at that are the ones who will rise to the occasion and take you up on that offer. Let's think back to the empathy slide. Focus on the safety of stakeholders. No one wants to basically be forgotten in this situation. No customer wants to think that you're reaching out to them in your communications simply to secure your revenue stream. No one wants, no employee, for example, wants your check-ins to come across as you're just checking on productivity. So of course we need to worry about our bottom line, but we need to be genuinely concerned about our stakeholders. And I use this term stakeholders, I want to be very clear. We're not talking about shareholders, we're talking about stakeholders. So that's your employees, your partners, your community. Community is one of the biggest parts of your stakeholders. In the community in which you operate, who is nearby? Are there homes nearby? Are there businesses nearby that you can support? Look for ways that you can do both in helping employees do their job and balancing their lives, with vendors, helping them succeed in balancing their lives. Help them, for example, with tips on how to stay safe. Just because you might be an advertising agency doesn't mean you don't care and you're not paying attention to great resources out there. Most likely in the next few weeks, we're probably going to have a lot of time on our hands. Look for ways to provide resources to your stakeholders. Look for ways to show them that you care about their safety, because that's when the dust settles and we get to the other side of this, they're going to remember those who helped them out. But just make sure that you are being a resource and not a nuisance. Okay, big one here. There are three major realities that make communications harder now than ever before. That's the deterioration in trust, that is the proliferation of misinformation, and the normalization of misinformation. It is in such disarray that I kid you not, I saw a reputable news outlet dismissing news the other day as fake news, only to 24 hours later be the fake news itself, because what they were reported on as being fake turned out to be true. So share facts from only reputable sources. It's proven that if you have two corroborating sources, it helps with reassurances of your employees and your other stakeholders. The CDC and the World Health Organization are the top choices. This is an interesting piece of data. It actually came out yesterday from the Institute for Public Relations, and it was a survey that they did across corporate communications, literally within the last few days. And it's not about just who you as an organization trust. You want to make sure that you're using news sources that everybody trusts. And so you can see it's kind of shocking. Just look at the first column there of who do people trust a lot: World Health Organization, federal agencies such as CDC. You go down, for example, country leaders is 9%. Social media, not that anyone on this call would be sharing, hey, I saw this post on social media and sending it out. But the fact of the matter is, what people want to hear is information from sources that when they say, oh, well, that came from the World Health Organization and the CDC, these guys know what they're talking about. They're giving me information that actually matters. Health and news, check health and news sources 3 times a day. This is coming from a study from PRSA that suggests a 3x policy. The fact is, in this particular situation, the facts are changing rapidly. And we all have news alerts on our phones and we're getting from different sources, but sometimes they aren't fast enough and you need time to prepare. So you should be checking news outlets 3 times a day at a minimum. Let's talk about operational steps. And this is what you can use in a day-to-day environment. So number 0, if you are lucky to have a crisis plan, stick with it. I will say it again, you are never too small to have a crisis plan. Maybe it's not the binders on binders that major corporations have, but you should have some plans around your communications, the reaction that you will be, who will be the point person for that communications, etc. It may relate to, God forbid, layoffs in your organization, or if you should lose power and you provide a service. If you can't provide services to your clients that they're expecting, you should have those communications already established. Here's what's interesting. If you think, well, no one was prepared for this, you're kind of right. Of the major corporations, Fortune 500, 50% of them, those are the ones that are hiring they're hiring crisis managers like myself and Chernoff Newman and large global firms. 50% of them had no plan in place for what we're dealing with right now. That's shocking. So as you go through this, as you're dealing with this, and I think many of you have, create a crisis team. That doesn't necessarily mean everybody in your organization. That doesn't mean every leader in your organization. It means the people that you know are capable of dealing with the crisis and addressing the needs of your organization. Maybe that's driving business results and how do we avoid hemorrhaging revenue, having an understanding of how are we dealing with HR, how are we dealing with technology. The more people that you bring into these situations, the more difficult it is to make decisions. So keep it small, keep it effective, and make sure you have, as I said earlier, the smartest people you can have in that room, even if they're not necessarily the ones that would be on the leadership team. Make sure that you're communicating internally. Communicate, I know here at Chernoff Newman, we communicate with our employees at a minimum of daily. And as things are so fluid, we reach out to them multiple times across the day, either using platforms such as Slack or email, but make sure that you are communicating with your internal employees. Communicate externally. If you haven't done so already, I would recommend you reach out to every single one of your clients in some way using those tenets of communication with empathy, looking for solutions, and make sure that they're okay. They want to know that you are there for them. This isn't about soliciting more business. This isn't about asking to do things for them. It's literally saying, we are here for you. These are ways that we think we might be able to help you. Consider doing it at this stage in the game where everyone is looking for hardship help to not necessarily charge for it, if that's something that you can do. But be in communication with those people that you're going to rely on for revenue in the future. Reassure stockholders and partners. Now, I realize very few people have shareholders, but make sure that they are being communicated with on a regular basis. Your partners and your vendors, make sure that they are being communicated. Transparency is the most important really factor here. And then remain proactive. Don't wait for this to escalate. Don't wait for it to de-escalate. Provide those resources, provide the information that you can now. And when things change, touch base. Think back on what we said earlier. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of uncertainty. Even in your small part of your customer's ecosystem, maybe you only provide 10% of what they're worrying about on any given day. If you are providing them the reassurances that actually make them feel better, so that's 10% less worry they have, they're going to remember you for it. So remain proactive. So these are common questions. I think I mentioned to you earlier that we've been getting questions, we've been working with our clients, and I thought I would just address a few of these. And this is one we've been getting a lot of. I think this question is starting to diminish, but think of it more of, should I cancel my next event? If your event is in the next 3 weeks, it's canceled. I know that to be the case. But what about the ones that are 2 months away? What about the one that drives 50% of your revenue every year? Or the one where you meet all of your potential customers? You don't want to give that up. So what I would ask is do a few things. Consult your legal counsel in regards to contracts that you have signed. There are cancellation clauses, things are changing, but engage in those discussions. What are the exclusions in those contracts? If you're hosting the event, figure out from your insurance provider, what's your liability in hosting the event or in canceling the event? If this virus is not gone and you decide to host an event, let's say 2 months from now, and that 50% of the population that isn't going to get it, and yes, that's what they're saying now, 50% of the population is likely to get it. If that 50% is in the population and they come to your event and then they get sick, you have set yourself up for a major liability. So see what your policies are. And then consult with sources. So here in South Carolina, DHEC, or the Office of Emergency Management, people in your industry, are there associations? Get a sense of what other people are doing. Don't rely solely on forecasting from the media. But also recognize at the end of the day, you need this to be a business decision that is based on concrete and rational data. So if you choose to have your event and it takes place, recognize that your attendees are going to have a lot of questions and be prepared to answer those. Save yourself the time and have responses now, because they're going to be looking at their calendar and they see that June 1 event. You're going to be getting a lot of questions that you can then send on to them. So if you've decided to cancel, what are going to be the bottom line financial ramifications? How are you going to recover your expenses? Is there any way to claim lost revenue? Maybe it's in your taxes. But take a moment to say, for example, review your force majeure laws and cancellation clauses. You may be covered. But if you have time, if it is June, if it's July, come up with contingency planning sooner rather than later, because the bottom line is you don't want to give in to the fear that's taking place right now when you have the opportunity to maybe save your event. You look, and I'm no doctor, but if you look over in China, they're coming out of this, and we will too. So that doesn't mean you may be able to have a fully functional, needed event come June 1st. Maybe it's July 1st, but so don't just cancel it because everything else is getting canceled. So how often do I communicate with my clients? This is a non-answer and I apologize. As often as you need to. When you're communicating with your clients, I will tell you that I try and touch base with my top clients every single day. Like I said, a lot of people are fearful and they want to know that you are there for them. I am not going to them asking them, how's their budget looking? I'm asking them how they're doing. I'm asking them if there's anything that we can provide from them. Are they okay in resources? We all have resources beyond what we probably give ourselves credit for. So when people are looking for a lawyer, when people are looking for someone who is in need of, how to communicate, for looking for someone, even medical resources. If you have that information, you might be the person that makes your client's day so much easier and brings the stress level down in their organization. So communicate regularly and you will get a very good sense from your client as to when they want you to call back. How about your employees? Well, I talked earlier about here at Chernoff Newman, we do it every single day. We have a call every morning. We round up the troops and, well, I should say the leadership at least, and then we communicate out to the troops. We make sure that there is no light between our decisions and what we're doing as an organization and our employee base. We want them to be in lockstep with us. So that means if you are a small organization, that can be done very easily. If you're an organization with disparate offices that you need to communicate with, it needs to be done more regularly. Use the technology. This is when AAF reached out to me, you know, there's plenty of webinar things that take platforms that take time to get set up. We were like, let's just get this done, throw it on Zoom and knock it out. And that you can do that in your organization. Don't let perfect get in the way of just trying to get it done. People want that information. There are people that are at home, they're trying to balance their lives. They don't want to have questions about whether their employer understands what they're dealing with or is there for them. So communicate at least once a day and maybe arguably 2 days or twice a day, but also use the platforms such as Zoom and Slack to communicate with your team. So who in my company should communicate to our stakeholders? So typically with issues related to employees, you might turn to someone who's more in the HR space. Or if there was a major misstep due to an ad campaign or something like that, a CMO might step out in a large organization. And you know, I've always been of the mindset that things can escalate. So in a situation such as, and that's a presentation for another day of how companies dealt with advertising, bad advertising that went horribly wrong, and a CMO responds, and then it just kept going horribly wrong, and you can escalate it to the CEO. But my take on this is, in the case of coronavirus, I think you start with the CEO. When events are completely out of our hands, such as the spread of a virus, what an organization needs, what your employees need, what your stakeholders need is leadership. And that leadership needs to come from the top. So start at the CEO, stay at the CEO, and then when we get to the other side of the storm, then maybe we can de-escalate it to more operationally relevant individuals. So when is it going to be safe to communicate at all as well? And I know those questions aren't coming to me as a medical professional. It's literally, when should we communicate? And you know what? I can't tell you. No one can. What we've learned, like I said, watching Asia, is that there is light at the end of the tunnel. But clearly we don't know when that's going to be for our market. So my suggestion is listen to the experts, see what the CDC is saying, the World Health Organization is saying. Look to your peers. The dominoes will fall for the better, but we have to wait to get through the worst of it. Look for the escalation of cases to die off. And look for, you'll see the signs in society and follow those signs. So here are the questions of sort of the catch-all. So what questions should I be asking myself from an organization standpoint? Well, for one, how productive will your business be, impacted by the coronavirus? And what are you going to do when and if that productivity drops? When you have employees working at home and they're trying to balance their entire lives beyond just employment, productivity will take a hit. So if you know that you are going to have to let customers down, which ones are they going to be? How are you going to communicate that to them? And how are you going to try and resolve the issue? Do you have a workable crisis plan? I think many people probably don't. A lot of companies don't. Now might be the time to put together a crisis plan of how you are going to communicate. And I hate to use this example, but if you have layoffs, if you lose your biggest customer, this isn't just a crisis plan as it relates to the media or the external world. What's your crisis plan for communicating to your shareholders, for communicating to your employees that you just lost your biggest client? And are you balancing your process with a human approach? In times of crisis, we can throw ourselves into a process and we want to just follow it by the steps and say, sorry guys, this is the way we handle this. But the fact is, in times like this, we need to have a human approach over everything we do. That empathy is important in everything we do. So make sure that how you communicate, the processes that you use, are integrated to just being a good human, being a good person, understanding the hardships that not only you are facing, but your employees are facing, their families are facing, your customers and their families are facing. Be there for everyone in every way you possibly can. So to that point, here's what I'm going to offer. I know there are questions you don't necessarily want to pose to a large group. I know there are documents you may want to discuss. And you're probably just questions you're too afraid to ask. We're all in this together. And the only way we're going to get through it is by supporting each other. So bear with me because I think I might have set this up properly. But if you follow this link, you can book 15 minutes on my calendar across the next 2 weeks. It should theoretically block off any meetings I have, but I can't promise you I won't reach out to reschedule. It's an open offer. There's no charge. And we're simply looking to help people the best way we can. And I look at it this way. The only thing that we can do right now, when there are so many questions, is do our best for ourselves, our company, our community, our clients, and our country. And my hope is that this coronavirus brings out the best in what we can do, and how we operate. And what I'm going to try and lead by example on that one. And so please feel free, and I'll go back to it because I realized that was kind of a long link, but feel free to reach out. It's not permanent. It's just there for a window. But I want to help you guys out if you should have any questions or need some consult. So I'll put it up there. Again, here's the other thing. AAF put me in charge of this presentation, so I'm going to be the one to end it. I want to take just again, thank you everyone, and especially to AAF for asking me to do this. I'll just say it again. We need to support each other as an industry, as a region, and today, tomorrow, next month, but really also when we get to the other side of the storm, and that means supporting each other financially as well. Hiring each other, looking for ways to partner. If you have any questions, reach out to me, either DM me on Twitter, book some time on my calendar. To AAF and to all of you, I really appreciate the opportunity. So there are questions, and I'm trying to read them. So we're Culpeper, VA. Oh, no, I see what you're saying. You just want us to send you a presentation. We'll do that. Scroll up to the top. So this is being recorded, and so you can listen to it. You can, and I'll talk to AAF afterwards about having the keynote also just available for download. But I think that's it. If you scroll to the, I think that's it for right now. Really appreciate everyone's time today, and stay safe out there, and good luck, guys.